Close your eyes for a moment and think of the last time you were truly tested. Maybe it was a personal loss, a health crisis, financial hardship, or even just the weight of life pressing in from all directions. In that moment, when everything seemed uncertain, when fear crept in and solutions seemed far away, what kept you from breaking? For many, the answer is not found in resources, status, or even raw determination. The answer lies in something deeper, something unseen yet profoundly powerful: faith. Faith is the quiet force that whispers, "You can endure this," even when circumstances scream the opposite. It is that invisible current that carries people across storms they never imagined they could survive. Faith as a source of inner strength is not merely a spiritual cliché. It is an undeniable reality woven into the lives of countless individuals throughout history. When human beings reach the limit of their own abilities, when the weight of uncertainty becomes unbearable, faith steps in as a stabilizing anchor. It is not about ignoring pain or pretending problems do not exist. It is about believing that, even in the darkest moments, there is a power greater than fear, greater than suffering, and greater than ourselves. This belief becomes a wellspring of strength, giving us the courage to face what seems impossible. Consider how athletes often speak about visualizing victory long before stepping onto the field. Their bodies are trained, yes, but it is the belief in their capacity to endure and win that pushes them beyond exhaustion. Faith operates in much the same way, but on a far deeper and more existential level. When you believe that your life is held by something greater, you find the endurance to keep moving, even when the path ahead is steep. Faith allows you to lean on strength you cannot always explain, but which you can undeniably feel. Think of a person walking through grief. The loss feels unbearable, like a weight on the chest that never lifts. Many who have walked through such valleys will tell you that it was their faith that gave them the inner strength to put one foot in front of the other. Faith tells the grieving heart that pain will not last forever, that there is a reason to keep living, and that love and meaning still exist beyond the current suffering. Without faith, despair can easily consume a person. With faith, hope is rekindled, even if only in small sparks that eventually grow into light. There is also a psychological dimension to this truth. Studies in resilience have shown that individuals with strong faith, whether in God, in a higher purpose, or in the goodness of life itself, are better able to withstand stress and trauma. Faith activates the inner narrative that reminds us we are not powerless victims of circumstance, but participants in a larger story. When your mind holds on to faith, your body follows, producing the energy and focus needed to withstand hardship. Neuroscience even suggests that belief reshapes the brain's pathways, fostering calmness, reducing anxiety, and strengthening emotional regulation. In other words, faith not only strengthens the spirit, but also equips the mind and body to respond resiliently to adversity. It is important to note that inner strength through faith is not about instant solutions. Faith does not magically remove obstacles or erase pain. Instead, it equips us with a reservoir of patience and fortitude. It reminds us that setbacks are not the end of the story. Faith gives us permission to rest, to breathe, and to trust in timing beyond our control. Imagine climbing a mountain with no clear view of the summit. The climb is exhausting, the path treacherous, and doubts constantly whisper, "You won't make it." Yet faith is like a voice that says, "Keep climbing. There is something waiting at the top that you cannot see right now." That voice becomes the difference between giving up halfway and discovering the breathtaking view at the summit. Faith also acts as an inner compass. In times of confusion, when choices seem overwhelming and directions unclear, faith helps us center ourselves. It gives us clarity not always through answers, but through peace. The peace of knowing we are guided and not alone. That clarity brings confidence, and confidence strengthens resolve. It allows us to step forward, even when the path is uncertain, trusting that each step is taking us closer to where we are meant to be. Another profound aspect of faith's inner strength is how it transforms fear. Fear thrives in the unknown. It paralyzes us by convincing us we are helpless. But faith reframes the unknown not as an enemy, but as a space where possibilities can unfold. Where fear says, you can't, faith says, you can, because you are not alone. Where fear insists on limitations, faith opens the door to potential. This shift in perspective is not just comforting, it is empowering. It creates the resilience to take risks, to step into challenges, and to endure hardships with a steady heart. We see this vividly in stories of ordinary people who faced extraordinary adversity. A refugee mother who loses everything, but still holds her children with determination and hope. A soldier who clings to prayer in the chaos of battle. A patient who fights through long months of illness, refusing to let despair win. These are not superhuman figures. They are people who drew from the deep reservoir of faith to find strength within themselves that they might not have otherwise discovered. Their resilience is living proof that faith can carry us through circumstances that would otherwise overwhelm us. On a personal level, faith teaches us to shift focus from what we cannot control to what we can. It teaches acceptance without surrender. When you are facing a storm, you cannot control the wind or the rain, but faith gives you the strength to adjust your sails. That strength is quiet yet powerful, allowing you to persevere without bitterness, to suffer without losing dignity, and to fight without losing compassion. Ultimately, faith as a source of inner strength is about transformation. It transforms despair into hope, weakness into endurance, and fear into courage. It does not promise that life will be easy, but it does promise that we will never walk alone. It assures us that there is always more strength available to us than what we think we possess. And in this assurance, resilience is born. So, when life presses in, when exhaustion threatens to break your spirit, remember this: faith is not just a belief. It is a force. It is the voice that steadies trembling hands, the anchor that keeps you from drifting, the fire that keeps burning when everything else goes dark. If you nurture it, if you allow it to guide you, faith will not just carry you through the storms of life, it will make you unshakable in the face of them. Imagine standing in total darkness. The walls close in, the silence is heavy, and you cannot see a way forward. In such a place, fear multiplies, despair whispers, and the weight of hopelessness feels suffocating. But then, in the distance, a faint light appears. It is small, fragile, almost imperceptible, but it is there. You move toward it, and suddenly the darkness does not seem as absolute. That tiny spark becomes a guide, a reason to keep going. This is the power of faith to nurture hope and optimism in the face of adversity. When everything else seems stripped away, faith produces a light strong enough to outshine despair, and in that light, resilience is born. Hope and optimism are not superficial attitudes of looking on the bright side. They are survival mechanisms essential to the human spirit. Without hope, people give up, surrendering to despair. With hope, even the most broken individuals can rise again. Faith fuels this hope by giving us a vision of something better, something beyond our present pain. It whispers of possibilities not yet seen, assuring us that what is does not have to define what will be. Faith does not deny the reality of suffering, but it insists that suffering does not have the final word. This is why faith has been described as the soil in which hope grows. Just as a seed needs earth to take root, hope needs faith to sustain it. When we believe in a greater good, in a higher purpose, or in divine providence, we naturally generate optimism. We begin to see difficulties not as permanent walls, but as temporary hurdles. Faith lifts our eyes beyond immediate circumstances, showing us that tomorrow can be different from today. That vision of tomorrow empowers us to endure today's trials with patience and determination. History provides countless examples of this truth. Consider the stories of those who lived through the most unimaginable hardships: wars, famines, oppression, or imprisonment. Time and again, the testimony is clear: it was hope, grounded in faith, that kept them alive. Survivors of concentration camps, for instance, often recount that those who maintained some kind of belief, whether in God, justice, or simply the possibility of freedom, were the ones who endured. Faith gave them the mental and emotional resilience to withstand horrors that would have otherwise destroyed them. Their bodies may have been weak, but their spirits were sustained by the fire of hope that faith ignited. On a more everyday level, people struggling with personal setbacks, such as job loss, illness, or broken relationships, find the same principle at work. Faith nurtures optimism, which in turn provides the strength to keep searching for solutions, to keep reaching for healing, and to keep moving forward. For example, someone battling a chronic disease may find their faith telling them that life is still meaningful, that each day still holds value, and that recovery, if not physical, may be emotional or spiritual. This optimism transforms the quality of their life, even while their circumstances remain difficult. Psychology reinforces this connection. Research consistently shows that individuals with a hopeful outlook tend to recover more quickly from trauma, cope better with stress, and maintain stronger mental health. Optimism, far from being wishful thinking, has tangible effects on both body and mind. The immune system strengthens, resilience to depression increases, and problem-solving abilities improve. What faith does is supply the fuel for this optimism, especially when circumstances seem to offer no logical reason for it. Faith allows us to hope against hope, to believe in possibilities when evidence suggests otherwise. That paradox, believing before seeing, often becomes the very thing that leads to breakthroughs and unexpected victories. There is also a transformative dimension to faith-inspired optimism. When you believe that there is goodness ahead, you begin to live differently in the present. Instead of succumbing to bitterness or fear, you cultivate patience, kindness, and perseverance. Optimism is not just about expecting better outcomes. It shapes how you behave today. Faith-driven hope influences your choices, encouraging you to act in alignment with the future you believe in. For instance, someone with faith that reconciliation is possible in a broken relationship will approach conversations with more humility and openness than someone who has already given up. The optimism rooted in faith changes not only expectations, but also actions, and those actions often create the very outcomes that were hoped for. One of the most remarkable aspects of hope fueled by faith is its contagious nature. Optimism spreads. When one person chooses to stand in faith and believe in better days, others around them are lifted. A community struck by disaster, for example, can be paralyzed by despair. But when even a few people stand firm in faith, declaring through words and deeds that recovery is possible, the spirit of the entire community begins to shift. Faith becomes a shared flame, passed from one person to another, igniting resilience on a collective scale. This is why leaders, teachers, healers, and parents who embody faith-driven hope have such a profound impact on those around them. Their optimism gives others permission to believe as well. Faith's ability to nurture hope also redefines how we interpret setbacks. Without faith, failure can feel like the end. But with faith, failure is reframed as part of a journey. Optimism does not deny the pain of failure. It transforms it into a stepping stone. It says, "This is not the end. There is something to learn here. There is a reason to keep going." This mindset prevents despair from taking root, allowing resilience to grow instead. Every setback becomes an opportunity for growth. Every disappointment a chance to deepen trust. In this way, faith transforms obstacles into teachers, fueling optimism that the struggle itself has meaning. Even in the most personal and intimate struggles, those moments when no one else can see or understand the pain, faith still whispers hope. For someone wrestling with loneliness, faith assures them that they are not truly alone. For someone overwhelmed with guilt or regret, faith promises forgiveness and renewal. For someone staring at an uncertain future, faith whispers that they are held, guided, and not abandoned. These quiet assurances are often the very thing that keeps the human heart alive in moments when giving up seems easier. At its deepest level, faith reminds us that the future is not written solely by present circumstances. No matter how broken the present moment may appear, faith insists that there is always a reason to hope. This insistence is what allows people to keep building, to keep loving, to keep striving, even when they are surrounded by reasons to quit. It is the refusal to surrender to despair, the determination to believe that there is more to the story. This refusal is the essence of resilience, and it is faith that sustains it. So when the darkness presses in, when the weight of life feels unbearable, faith calls us to lift our eyes. It does not promise an easy path or instant answers, but it does promise light. That light may begin as a spark, small, fragile, barely visible. But with faith, that spark becomes a flame, and that flame becomes a fire. Hope grows, optimism strengthens, and resilience becomes unshakable. This is the gift of faith. It nurtures within us the belief that no matter how heavy the night, the morning will come. When life's storms arrive, one of the deepest struggles we face is not just the pain of the moment, but the haunting question of, why? Why did this happen to me? Why now? Why in this way? Adversity often shakes us because it disrupts the meaning we've attached to our lives. Human beings are storytellers by nature. We interpret our experiences, string them into narratives, and use those stories to guide our identity and choices. When tragedy or difficulty strikes, those stories can collapse, leaving us feeling lost, purposeless, and adrift. This is where faith steps in, not to erase hardship, but to help us reframe it, to create meaning even in the midst of pain. It is through meaning making that resilience grows, because once suffering is given a context, it becomes something we can endure and even transcend. Faith has always offered a framework for interpreting life's challenges in a way that elevates them from random misfortune to purposeful experience. Whether it is the belief that trials refine character, the conviction that suffering is part of a greater divine plan, or the trust that every difficulty carries hidden lessons, faith reshapes hardship into something survivable. When a person believes their pain has meaning, endurance becomes possible. When they believe that their suffering is not in vain, their resilience becomes stronger than the force of the storm. It is not the absence of suffering that creates resilient individuals, but the presence of meaning that transforms their response to it. Think about the difference between someone who suffers without explanation and someone who suffers with a sense of purpose. A person who feels their pain is meaningless often falls into despair. But a person who believes their suffering contributes to growth, teaches a lesson, or connects them to others can find a reason to keep going. Faith provides that reason. It tells us that there is more than what we concede, that our struggle is not wasted, and that out of pain, something valuable can emerge. This shift in perspective is profound because resilience is not simply about bouncing back. It is about moving forward with wisdom, strength, and renewed clarity. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously observed that those who survived the concentration camps were often those who managed to find meaning in their suffering. He argued that human beings can endure almost any how if they have a why. That why is what faith offers. It is the conviction that life is bigger than the moment of pain. Faith whispers, there is purpose in this, even when the purpose is not immediately visible. That assurance allows a person to rise each morning and keep moving forward, even when everything around them feels broken. This meaning, making through faith, also brings hope into sharp focus. For example, someone battling illness may draw on faith to believe that their struggle will not only shape their own character, but may also inspire others. Parents enduring hardship may frame their sacrifices as a legacy of love for their children. Communities facing disaster often turn to faith to see tragedy as a chance to come together, to rebuild stronger, and to demonstrate compassion. Each of these examples shows how faith turns random suffering into a narrative of resilience. By giving trials meaning, faith ensures that pain does not destroy, but instead transforms. Another vital dimension of meaning making is that faith gives us a lens to see ourselves as part of a greater story. Without this perspective, it's easy to feel that life is nothing more than chaos. But faith situates us within a narrative bigger than our individual struggles. Whether that story is one of divine providence, cosmic order, or spiritual growth. It tells us that our suffering is connected to something greater than ourselves. This sense of connection diminishes feelings of isolation and expands resilience by reminding us that we are not the only ones walking through valleys. Faith encourages us to lift our gaze beyond the immediate pain and to see our hardships as chapters, not conclusions, in the larger story of life. There is also a deeply personal power in how faith helps people reinterpret setbacks. Where one might see failure, faith can help frame it as a stepping stone. Where one might see betrayal, faith can help frame it as a lesson in trust and discernment. Where one might see loss, faith can frame it as an invitation to cherish what remains. This reframing is not about denying the reality of suffering, but about finding a constructive meaning within it. It allows resilience to blossom because the heart now has a reason to keep striving. In a practical sense, faith's capacity for making helps reduce the psychological burden of adversity. The human mind craves coherence. It struggles with chaos and randomness. When events feel meaningless, the mind becomes trapped in anxiety and despair. Faith provides the coherence the mind craves. It organizes chaos into order, randomness into story, pain into purpose. With that mental shift, resilience becomes not only possible but sustainable. The person who sees their suffering as meaningful does not carry it as a crushing weight, but as a challenge that shapes who they are becoming. Faith also ensures that making is not limited to individual resilience, but extends to collective resilience. Communities facing collective tragedy, wars, natural disasters, or social injustice often turn to faith to interpret their shared pain. This collective framing allows groups to find strength together. When a community believes their suffering has meaning, they are able to unify, support one another, and rebuild stronger. Resilience, in this sense, is not only personal, but cultural, forged through shared belief in a greater purpose. The beauty of making through faith is that it evolves with time. In the midst of crisis, the meaning may not be clear. Faith does not demand immediate answers. Instead, it allows us to trust that meaning will reveal itself in time. What seems unbearable today may later be remembered as the very experience that shaped character, taught endurance, or deepened compassion. Faith teaches us to live in that tension, to endure without all the answers, trusting that clarity will come. That trust alone lightens the emotional load because it assures us that today's pain is not forever meaningless. In the end, faith's gift of making does not eliminate suffering, but it does redeem it. It transforms adversity from an enemy into a teacher, from a stumbling block into a stepping stone. It allows individuals to face trials not with despair but with dignity, not with defeat but with determination. And most importantly, it allows them to keep moving forward, carrying scars not as symbols of destruction, but as marks of survival, wisdom, and growth. So when life feels senseless, when the weight of why feels unbearable, faith is the voice that says, there is purpose here, even if you cannot yet see it. That purpose is the soil in which resilience takes root. It is what allows human beings not only to withstand hardship, but to emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Faith gives meaning to pain, and in that meaning, it gives us the strength to endure. When you think back to the hardest moments in your life, who stood beside you? Was it a family member, a friend, a mentor, or perhaps a community of people who refused to let you walk alone? Adversity has a way of stripping us down, but it also reveals something profound. We are not meant to endure life's storms in isolation. Faith strengthens resilience not only through inner conviction or personal meaning, but through the networks of love, compassion, and support it inspires. It calls us into community, and that community becomes a lifeline in times of crisis. Human beings are social creatures. We are wired for connection, and when we are cut off, our resilience weakens. Stress, trauma, and despair often drive people into isolation, convincing them no one could possibly understand their pain. Yet faith communities, whether religious congregations, spiritual circles, or networks bound by shared belief, break through that isolation. They say, you don't have to carry this alone. That assurance itself can become the difference between giving up and finding the courage to continue. Faith binds people together with a shared language of hope, prayer, and compassion, creating an environment where resilience can flourish. Consider what happens in the aftermath of disaster. A hurricane devastates a town, a fire destroys homes, or war displaces families. In the face of overwhelming loss, it is often faith-based communities that mobilize first, offering shelter, meals, clothing, and comfort. Beyond the material support, however, is something equally powerful: the spiritual solidarity of standing together. Knowing that others are not only helping physically, but also lifting you up in prayer or encouragement creates a strength that surpasses the crisis itself. Can you imagine how much harder it would be to rebuild if no one stood with you, if you had to carry both grief and recovery entirely on your own? Faith-based community also plays an essential role in shaping identity during hard times. When individuals are shaken by loss or failure, the community reminds them of who they are and what they mean to others. In many traditions, rituals and gatherings provide spaces to reaffirm belonging and dignity. For example, in mourning, rituals like prayer services or collective remembrance create a framework where grief is shared rather than borne privately. This collective process strengthens resilience because it externalizes pain, transforming it into a shared burden instead of a solitary weight. A profound truth is that resilience often grows not only from receiving support, but also from giving it. Faith inspires people to care for one another, and in that act of service, both the giver and receiver are strengthened. Think of how many people in crisis have said, "Helping others gave me strength to endure my own struggles." This paradox is deeply rooted in faith traditions which emphasize compassion, generosity, and service. By giving, individuals discover reserves of strength within themselves they never knew existed. The community becomes a web of mutual support where resilience multiplies. There is also a psychological dimension to how faith-based community fosters resilience. Isolation can magnify trauma, but connection helps the mind and heart process it. Conversations with others who share similar beliefs normalize emotions, reduce feelings of shame, and provide coping strategies. A struggling person may ask, "How do I endure this loss? How do I keep moving when everything feels broken?" And within the community, they find others who have walked similar paths, offering living testimonies of survival. That exchange of stories becomes a powerful medicine, proving that resilience is not only possible, but within reach. Questions naturally arise when we think of the role of faith in community. Who do you turn to when you feel like giving up? Do you allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to receive help, or do you try to carry it all alone? How often do you reach out to others in your faith network when you see them struggling? These questions are worth reflecting on because resilience is not just an individual quality, it is a shared practice. When one person is weak, the strength of others carries them. When that person regains strength, they in turn lift someone else. This cycle is the heartbeat of resilient communities rooted in faith. Another key aspect is the way community provides accountability. Resilience can sometimes falter when people feel tempted to withdraw, numb themselves, or give up. In a faith-centered community, people notice when someone is missing, when they are silent, or when their spirit seems heavy. That gentle accountability, someone checking in, asking, "Are you okay? How can I help?" becomes a safety net. It reminds us that our struggles do not go unnoticed and that we matter enough for someone to care. Faith communities also reinforce shared values that cultivate resilience. Teachings of perseverance, forgiveness, compassion, and hope are not only preached but lived out collectively. When adversity strikes, these values rise to the surface, shaping how individuals respond. For example, a community that values forgiveness may encourage members to release bitterness after betrayal, allowing them to heal more quickly. A community that emphasizes hope reminds its people that even in tragedy, light is possible. These shared values become guiding stars that help individuals navigate storms without losing themselves. It is worth asking what happens to resilience when a person lacks community. Isolation leaves people more vulnerable to despair, to destructive coping mechanisms, and to the false belief that they are alone in their suffering. Without the encouragement and perspective of others, it becomes much harder to reframe pain, to keep going, or to believe in the possibility of healing. This is why faith's call to gather, to connect, and to stand together is not just a spiritual practice, but a survival mechanism. The collective rituals of faith also strengthen resilience by marking time and progress. Weekly gatherings, festivals, or communal prayers create rhythm and structure in chaos. They remind people that life goes on, that there is continuity, even when personal circumstances feel disrupted. In celebrating together, grieving together, and working together, communities weave resilience into the very fabric of daily life. Of course, no community is perfect. Sometimes people hesitate to lean on their faith communities because of fear of judgment or rejection. Yet, when communities embody the true spirit of faith, compassion, acceptance, and unconditional support, they become sanctuaries of resilience. They show us that we do not have to be strong alone, that vulnerability is not weakness, and that healing is often found in connection. Faith-inspired community also pushes resilience beyond survival into transformation. Together, people not only endure but create new possibilities. A congregation rebuilds after a fire and emerges with stronger bonds. A small group rallies around a member battling illness and discovers new depths of love. A neighborhood united by faith transforms tragedy into advocacy, changing policies to prevent future harm. In each case, resilience grows not because the hardship vanished, but because people stood together in faith and refused to let adversity define them. So, as you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, who are the people of faith that you lean on in difficult times? And perhaps more importantly, who leans on you? The answer to those questions may reveal the depth of your resilience. Because ultimately, resilience is not about individual toughness. It is about collective strength. It is about the hands that hold you when you cannot stand, the voices that remind you of hope when you cannot speak it, and the hearts that keep you connected when despair tempts you to withdraw. Faith teaches us that we are never alone, not spiritually and not socially. The communities it builds are not just places of worship, but places of healing, encouragement, and resilience. Together, people of faith can withstand storms that would crush them in isolation. Together, they embody the truth that resilience is not a solitary achievement, but a shared miracle. And together, they prove that even in the darkest nights, the light of connection cannot be extinguished.